Good morning, and welcome to the Morning Drive. I'm your host, Brooks Fiesinger of BrooksFiesinger.com and MillionaireWho.com. Millionaire Who, where we help stabilize your wallet, secure your finances, and succeed in entrepreneurship and finance. I'm here with my host today, a 2015 Hyundai Sonata. You know, Hyundai Sonata doesn't sound like the most exciting car in the world, but I didn't know that I was becoming successful until I had the opportunity to begin driving one. I had spent many years of my life. I drove a BMW for a while. I had a Cadillac CTS for a while. Loved that car. It was a blast to drive. I've had a number of cars. In fact, I've had over 60 cars in my life. And the funny thing about driving the Hyundai Sonata is that eventually I did an assessment of all the cars out there in the market, all the cars I could possibly drive. And this was one of the most challenging car selections I ever had. So I was, test driving. I drove the Cadillac XTS V Sport. I test drove the Genesis. I test drove all these cars. And none of them were quite doing it for me. One of the initial sticking points I had is I'm one of those nutcases that likes a manual transmission, and none of these cars had manual transmissions. And the ones that did have a manual transmission, like the SS from Chevrolet, technically met a lot of my needs, but then I had to suffer through the whole issue of, really low fuel economy and some of those things I didn't want to deal with. So finally, after all this assessment, I realized, I'm not going to be able to get the manual transmission for my daily driver, which is okay, because what do use my daily driver for? Driving to work. So after assessing a bunch of cars, I kind of realized that the Hyundai Sonata was the right car for me. It wasn't fast, but it had enough torque. The 2.0 turbo is not a bad motor. It's not fun to drive, but I never feel like it's boring to drive either. And the biggest thing for me is the automatic transmission. And while originally I told you I didn't want a car with an automatic transmission, the Hyundai Sonata, fortunately, has a very tight torque converter. And the nice thing about the very tight torque converter is that means that my shifts are pretty firm, and I don't feel like it's sitting there and wavering between gears. The thing that drives me crazy about automatic transmissions. Anyway, the point of the story is not to get into car stuff, but to talk about, the fact that I used to feel like I needed to or wanted to be driving something like a Cadillac or a BMW or a Porsche, because I wanted to feel like I was successful, right? I want to be like, I can afford this car. The truth of the matter is, I became successful when I knew there was nothing wrong with me driving a Hyundai Sonata. When I realized that the car itself did everything I needed, the value was there, I love the warranty on it, I bought it certified pre-owned with 7,000 miles on it. I sat there and said, this is everything I really, really want in a car. I'm totally happy with it, and I'm 100% content in my life. I have no qualms over the fact that I'm not driving what we call in the industry a Highline, right? Got no problem with the fact that I'm not driving a Hyundai or a BMW or a Cadillac or whatnot. Once again, I appreciate those cars. I'm not saying I'll never own one again, but at this point in my life, this was the perfect car for me, and I had no qualms about it. And that is exactly how I knew that I was finally successful. A book that I'll talk about at a future date is The Richest Man in Babylon. Another book that I'll talk about is The Millionaire Next Door. In The Millionaire Next Door, one of the things they talk about is how a lot of the wealthiest people, you'd never know it. And one of the funniest things I've discovered since I've had my Hyundai is how many other people I know that are extremely wealthy that are driving Hyundais. Some of them are driving Accents, some of them are driving Sonatas. And it's kind of interesting because they all followed a similar process as me when we were selecting vehicles. In fact, I had heard that LeBron James actually did drive a Kia, and because he drove that Kia had asked him to advertise and market the K900. And a lot of people gave him a hard time about that because they said there's no way somebody as successful and wealthy as LeBron James would drive a Kia. The fact of the matter is, based on all accounts that I've researched and discovered, he truly did own a Kia even before his relationship with Kia, the company. So I know a number of other people who are executives, vice presidents, entrepreneurs who actually drive these lower priced cars. And that's kind of what the Millionaire Who next door alludes to, is the idea that a lot of the wealthy people, you wouldn't realize it because the reason they're wealthy is because they're smart with their money. And that's also the cool thing that we'll get into in some of these sessions, is the idea that you too don't need to be a millionaire as far as income. You don't have to make $1 million in income to be a millionaire. You can actually, without too much trouble, become a millionaire off of a fairly small income. I was working with a gentleman this weekend talking through his finances, and I showed him a table about how if he's able to put away $400 a month, then by the time he retires, he will have over $1 million. And $400 a month might sound like a lot to you, but he makes well under $40,000 a year in income. And the interesting thing about getting him up to that dollar amount is we were able to find the money in little things about, let's get rid of these late fees. Let's get rid of this, take the $200 discount your insurance company is going to pay you by paying them up front instead of paying them monthly. And tackle some of these small little things that ended up freeing $400 a month. So without even changing his life, just tweaking some things and not doing anything stupid to get himself in further debt, he's going to successfully manage to save that $400 a month, and he's literally going to retire a millionaire. Where when he walked into my office, he didn't think that he'd have a chance to even ever retire or ever have anything in savings because he thought he was totally living paycheck to paycheck. And that is really the power of financial education. And there's a million other companies out there, exaggeration, that are dealing with financial education. But the kicker that all of them say, and I'll say the same thing, this stuff's not taught in schools, and that is so sad. How sad is it that we have such a strong education system, we put so much money in our education system, and yet virtually everybody who graduates from high school doesn't know how to balance a checkbook, not to mention has no idea how interest rates work and how finance works. And that's why we have Millionaire Who. And in Millionaire Who, we have this multi-tier system, and the idea is, for some of you, you are in debt and your goal is just to get out of debt, stabilize your wallet, make sure you've solved your major problems. And then once you get that done though, that's not enough to get where you want to go. And that's where some other groups fall short. They get you out of debt and then they say, la la, here you go. But I bet many of you have goals bigger than just simply getting out of debt. Right? And that's when we talk about securing your finances. And securing your finances is really setting up your future for things like, making sure that you have sufficient retirement savings, and make sure you're growing wealth, and make sure your family's taken care of. And those are the kind of things that we're really focusing on in that middle group. And there are a number of financial experts that end in that category. They end with the point of, dump all your money in a mutual fund and life will be better. And it's true. For many people, that's as far as you ever want to go. Your life will be better. But I can just about guarantee you that's not where a lot of you want to go. But that's where you have to be before you can even have conversations about things like actually starting a business and actually adding income streams and building that true financial freedom where you're not dependent on a job, because that's what a lot of people want to get to. Is you want to get to the point where you're not dependent on your job every week to be happy and healthy and successful long term. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about our Succeed group. And over time, we're going to be adding a number of Succeed courses in real estate investing and finance investing and different types of entrepreneurship. And so I hope you look forward to those, because that really opens the gamut of these little niches you can get into that will help you be tremendously successful in that true financial freedom and growing your wealth and becoming, frankly, more than a millionaire. Many of you will become, worth 500 million. Some of you will be worth over $1 billion, and that's awesome. And I look forward to hearing all those stories. But that's exactly what that Succeed group is. But if you're in debt You can get there, but it's a step, right? You've got to first stabilize your financial situation. You've got to get yourself in a situation where you're not killing yourself every single month. Then you can start moving yourself in a positive path to make sure you're taken care of, and then you take your step, the final step, which is creating those additional income streams and really succeeding in those areas that you want to succeed. So this is the first morning drive, and that means 99% of the people who are listening to this aren't actually going to listen to it when it posts. You're going to probably listen to it 6 to 12 months later after you've been caught in by some future episodes. And I'm going to go ahead and take this, this opportunity to talk about, why the morning drive. Why am I doing this? Now, I originally thought about the morning shift because I like that name, but I ran into 2 problems. The first problem is I don't have a manual transmission in this car, and while yes, automatics do technically shift, I feel pretty silly talking about shifting when my car is doing it automatically. Therefore, that didn't quite feel appropriate. The second is I am a fan of a website called jalopnik.com. Now, for those of you who are very sensitive, some of the language can be a little on the crude side, but it is, in my opinion, the absolute best source of information for the car community. And they have a piece, it is a fabulous piece that's put out every morning called The Morning Shift, where they get into all the most important things that are happening in the automotive industry each day. And so once again, I didn't want to conflict with that name. I didn't want to run into any branding issues. I didn't want to run into any copyright issues, even though we're covering completely different topics. But once again, the morning shift was gone, so you're left with the morning drive. Now, that doesn't answer why we're doing the morning drive to start with, and that is a little more straightforward. So, for a long time, I have been asked by peers, students, and others why or when they can talk to me. And frankly, my schedule is totally booked. I love the idea of working with people. I love the idea of helping people, but it's important to spend time with my family. It's important to spend time with my kids. It's important to make time for my wife. And so I can't fill every second that I have not working. And so what I started doing probably 10 years ago is I realized that my 30-minute to 1-hour commutes every day were the perfect time to allow people to reach out to me, have a phone conversation, talk about whatever they need to talk about, whether it's issues going on in their life, business propositions, anything that doesn't quite fit in with the normal day-to-day business activities. And I did that for many, many years. One thing I found out though is while I certainly get a lot of phone calls and I book up pretty easily in the evening shift, when I'm driving home from work, I don't get a lot of calls at 7 in the morning. And so since I realized I'm not getting a whole lot of calls this early in the morning, but it's free time that I normally spend listening to audiobooks, I could use this time to connect with you, my audience, and talk to you about some of these topics that we discuss in Millionaire Who, to really help you, once again, do what we can to improve your lives and make your lives better. So once again, since no one takes me up in the 7 o'clock shift, that means you've got me, and I look forward to this being a regular occurrence. I anticipate doing this weekly, and eventually possibly we'll roll it up daily, but as many other people have spoken to you about, if you've watched other videos or other podcasts, it takes preparation to have these sessions. It's not like you just get in a car and start talking, and if you did get in a car and just start talking, it'd be more boring than you would want it to be. So I'm not going to do that to you. So one of the topics I did want to talk about today is my video setup. This isn't the best setup in the world. I'll probably try a few different ones, but you've got to start somewhere. I was impressed a few years ago. I was in commercials for Escort radar detectors, and I had gotten the 2010 Camaro right when it came out. So in 2009, I went out and bought. I had the Bumblebee one. It was yellow. It was slick. It was an SS. I loved it. But I was one of the first people to have it. And so Escort Radar took some video footage of me in the car and used it in SEMA event out west, talking about one of their new products. And they had a incredibly complex video camera system. I mean, they had cameras in front of me, they had cameras behind me, they had microphones mic'd up all over the place. And that is probably the type of system I should be using. But once again, don't put the cart before the horse. It's better to do something than nothing. And so this is what we're going to start working with. We'll probably migrate from this soon to a more the flip cam style. Although I heard the flip cam company is pretty much shot. And then I'll eventually move to something a little more advanced. But hopefully this works for you. The broadcast quality doesn't change the message. So hopefully you can get something out of our conversations. So one of the things I did want to talk about was a book that I'm reading right now. I try to read at least one new book a week. And this is almost embarrassing to say, but I started finding myself struggling to find new books to read. And, I had read all the major ones, and we'll talk about a number of them on here, because it's good to reread and discuss. Some of those books that I liked, I've read 3, 4, 5 times, and I'll keep reading them over and over again, because you can keep getting more and more from them. But I was kind of running this wall where I was running out of things to read, and I jumped on Facebook. I asked what are the books that I read, and a lot of the recommendations I've already read, but there's literally millions of books out there. It's not even an exaggeration. So there's millions of books out there. There's got to be some stuff worth reading. So I picked up a book or two that were just simply awful, and I could not even stomach them. I could not get through them. I tried to read them, and they were a total bore. They were, I didn't even find them worth it. And so I was getting a little frustrated, and finally I picked up a recommended book from Audible, and the book was The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. And once again, I'm sitting there looking at this book cover, and you're not supposed to judge a book by the book cover, right? But don't we all? And I'm sitting there looking at this giant, 10X rule, and I'm like, oh, the one 10X rule of business. Clearly, the one rule that everybody uses, I've never heard of before. And really, I kind of poo-pooed it at first, like I do with a lot of things, unfortunately, right? So I decided, hey, I'm out of other things to listen to. I will give this a jab. And so I went ahead, I purchased it, downloaded it, and started listening to it. And my first thought was, this is going to be awful. But frankly, it's not been terrible. I'm not going to recommend it as a top book that you have to read, but it hits one single point. And some of the books that I really like cover so many different topics that you leave the book thinking, okay, what did I learn and what am I actually doing here? And the 10X rule does the exact opposite. It sits there and says, look, this book is going to be about one topic. Let's talk about that one topic and let's knock it out of the ballpark. So the primary topic the 10X rule is really talking about is the idea that everything you do takes 10 times the amount of effort, and you need to set your sights 10 times higher. They don't explicitly say this, but frankly, because you're probably going to fall a little short, and you'd rather fall short of being a billionaire and only have $100 million than fall short being a millionaire and only have $100,000. And that's kind of the premise. And the one thing I do want to speak to about this book is how, in my personal life, that concept has completely played out like that. I've gotten on my own case, and in fact, the creation of MillionaireWho is kind of a funny story. I won't rehash it totally here, but I founded MillionaireWho more than 10 years ago, and the idea was, here I was, a broke college student who's going to become a millionaire in just a couple of years, and I thought, becoming a millionaire is so easy. I'll just chronicle this path of becoming a millionaire, and then other people can follow my path. Won't it be great? And I set my sights at $1 million, because $1 million seemed like a plenty of money, right? I said $1 million sounds great. I'd love to be a millionaire. So my first goal was to be a millionaire by 25. I hit 25, and guess what? Wasn't a millionaire. Starting to get a little discouraged. I kept chasing these big opportunities, and I kept shooting myself in the foot over and over and over again. And so eventually, frankly, I quit, right? I gave up on that project. And the MillionaireWho website, I still owned it. And every time I got that GoDaddy renewal notice, I thought for a minute, I said, you know what? I'm going to cancel this. It's stupid to do this. I'm never going to do anything with it. I'm not going to become a millionaire. And I decided I was going to cancel it. But then I would kind of strategically forget, which I'll play mind games with myself sometimes. So I strategically forget to cancel GoDaddy. Year after year after year. Finally, I had a friend of mine who sent me a post on Facebook, and he was talking about how impressed he was with my success and how he really looked up to me and wanted to be successful like me. And that really flipped a switch in my head, because here I was, I drove a Ferrari, I drove a Porsche, I had the Cadillac, I had so much stuff going for me in life. I had a beautiful house, I had a wonderful family, I had real estate investments, I had businesses I owned, I had a great job where I earned, Employee of the Year. I had all this stuff going for me, and guess what? My net worth was over $1 million. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, so here I am, I totally met my goals, but because I didn't meet my goals when I thought I was, I gave up. Now, this offers a kind of unique perspective for me to talk to a lot of people, because it's easy to sit here and say, I happen to become a millionaire, therefore I'm going to talk to other people about becoming a millionaire. And what do? You look at them and say, you were a millionaire because you were lucky. You're a millionaire because this happened. But I can fortunately speak from the position of, I was a broke, literally eating ramen noodles kid who said he was going to become a millionaire, and 10 years later I am, right? Even after quitting this whole project because I was confident that I failed. And clearly I didn't fail. And this plays into the 10X rule because I failed to accurately assess how much work it was going to take to meet that $1 million target. If I would have followed Grant Cardone's 10X rules, and I would have said, look, it's going to take 10 times the amount of time, 10 times the amount of money, 10 times the amount of effort, would I have quit? Hopefully not. But I definitely wouldn't have quit because I underestimated things, right? So I find in many projects in my life, everything I do, it really does take more time. It takes more money. And the one thing that I'm gifted, or I shouldn't say I'm gifted, but I've experienced and learned from my experience, is that things do take so much more time and effort than you plan them. And so for businesses that I've joined and projects I've been part of, I've been able to work with my partners and just set up the expectation and say, look, we have great financial statements that say we're going to be profitable in 6 months. Guess what? We're not going to be profitable in 6 months. We're going to be profitable in several years. And once you reset that expectation and you extend that expectation, then you have the benefit of not quitting or getting discouraged early. And so that's been really powerful in a few of our businesses, that at first you'd feel like, hey, it's 6 months in and we're losing our shirts every month. But I'm able to sit there and say, remember the beginning, I told you this was going to take 2 to 4 years. And then guess what happens? Then we're talking in year 2 and year 3, we're sitting on profits rolling in, and instead of getting discouraged or frustrated, it's exactly as we planned. One of the other leading causes of businesses, and we talk about this a lot in school, for those who don't know, I am a college professor in entrepreneurship and marketing. I also do supply chain. And one of the topics that we talk about a lot in entrepreneurship classes specifically is how often businesses fail because they run out of money. And that's where the other side of the 10X rule is. I can't tell you how many business plans I've reviewed where somebody shows me this proposal, and the proposal calls for $120,000 or $200,000 of cash. And I always ask the question, where's that money coming from? And they'll say something like, I'm going to get an SBA loan, or I'm going to get a mortgage on my house, or I've got these 5 people who can give me this money, or even I have this money in savings. And I always have to ask the question of, what happens if it takes more time and more money than you budgeted? And what is the answer? Well, I'm going to make sure that it doesn't, or I don't know, or I'll figure it out when I get there. And that becomes the huge issue. And that is one of the reasons a lot of my businesses struggled early on when I was very young. I kind of started my first business when I was 13. And one of the reasons a lot of these projects and businesses failed really was because I didn't have the money. And in entrepreneurship, we love the story that you don't need money to be successful. There are opportunities that don't need money to be successful. But if your opportunity is to start the next car company and you're going to replace General Motors and Ford and you're going to compete dead on with Tesla, I'm going to tell you right now, you can't do that with 50 grand in your pocket. You're going to need enough cash flow and capital to make that happen. And that is such an important thing to talk about. And if you save $100,000 because your business plan needs $100,000, you better keep saving some more, or you better cut your plan costs and say, you know, instead of buying this prime real estate location, I'm going to buy this other real estate location because I can pay cash. And instead of having to rely on cash flow to pay for it every month, I'm going to go ahead and purchase it outright. And it'll cost me a little bit more, but my monthly costs are down, so therefore my long-term costs are down. Boo, there goes my company. So the 10X rule is fantastic from that standpoint, because we need that reminder that everything costs more and takes more time than you think it is, than your plan does. That does not mean planning is not important. I'll be the first to tell you, and not the last. No, I won't be the first, and I won't be the last to tell you that having a solid plan is essential to the success of business. But you also need more time and more money than you're thinking it'll take. That'll keep you from getting discouraged, and it will keep you from going broke and help let your business come to fruition. I have never been part of a business, never consulted. I've consulted with hundreds of businesses. I've never consulted with a business. I've never worked for a business. I've never owned a business that was able to be successful with less time or less money than planned. Never, right? That means my planning isn't great, nor is anyone else's I've worked with. And that's because it's very hard to plan. Plans are often best guesses. So the easy way around that is follow Grant Cardone's 10X rule, right? Expect it to take 10 times the amount of time and 10 times the amount of money. And the other kicker there is set your sights 10 times higher. That's also one of the things that I've kind of chuckled about in my life, is I've realized all my major goals. And that's kind of funny, but one of my lasting one was to buy a Ferrari. And I probably could have bought one earlier, but I didn't want to go blow money I didn't have and buy something I couldn't afford. So I put that off, and finally I bought that car, and I realized, gosh, I met all my goals. And guess what? My bucket list is full, and I'm much younger than I intended to be when my bucket list was full. And I realized that because it takes so much effort to accomplish these goals, if you set higher expectations, you'll achieve them. If I would have set the goal to buy a Corvette instead of a Ferrari, I would have achieved it probably in the same time. But setting the goal on a Ferrari became realistic, and it became something I could work towards. And guess what? I did it, and I was able to buy it. And so keep that in mind anytime you're setting goals, that you want to make sure you're setting high enough goals. Most people sell themselves short. It is not worth selling yourself short when you're setting your goals in life. And it's not worth running yourself into a wall because you didn't set aside enough money or enough time or high enough expectations to your success. So I'm going to agree fully with Cardone when he talks about set higher expectations. Don't set low expectations thinking that it's easier to achieve. Set higher, and don't settle. Don't say your expectations were too high down the road. Then also be prepared to spend a lot more money and a lot more time on those projects. That's really the main thing I want to talk about today. Certainly pick up that book, 10X Rule by Grant Cardone, if you want to discuss this topic further. It is a fairly straightforward issued book, and I'm not going to recommend it as a top book, but if you're looking for something to read, I would not discourage you from doing so. Last thing I want to talk about real quick is I saw an article last night, which is kind of cool. Ford was talking about how driving a sports car really has positive improvements on your emotional state. And I thought that was kind of cool because I like cars. It weaves it in, and I've always felt that way. But it's kind of cool to see paper on it. But that doesn't fit in with the Sonata. But I love the Sonata. All right. Thanks a lot for joining me today on the morning drive. I look forward to spending time with you in the future. Be sure to leave me notes and comments if you'd like to hear other specific topics. And I appreciate your time. All right, go out and make the impossible happen.